At first, everything about Lena's wedding felt like a dream. The soft glow of fairy lights, the laughter of friends and family, and the man she'd loved since high school standing at the altar waiting for her. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But by the end of the night, the cake would be in pieces, and Lena would be left wondering if her husband had been hiding something all along. Lena, 23, and Ethan, 26, had been together since they were teenagers. She called him her soulmate. They'd survived college, long distance, and the stress of planning a wedding on a tight budget. So when the big day finally arrived, it felt perfect. Until she noticed someone she didn't know. During bridal photos, Lena spotted Ethan's cousin Mallory talking to a woman she'd never seen before, a tall brunette with piercing eyes and a polite, practiced smile. Mallory introduced her as Sabrina, a friend who came as her +1. At first, Lena thought nothing of it. But the way Sabrina watched her, quiet, observant, sent a chill down her spine. Hours later, after the ceremony, Lena ran into Sabrina near the buffet. She was clearly drunk, swaying, a glass of wine in her hand. At first, Sabrina mumbled something about how crowded the venue was. But then she looked Lena straight in the eye and said, "I'm surprised Ethan married someone like you. He could have done better." Lena froze. There was no laughter, no smirk, just bitterness. Trying to keep her dignity, she smiled and said softly, "I guess I'm just lucky to have him." She walked away. But the words stayed with her. Hours later, when the party reached its peak, a sudden crash silenced everything. Glasses shattered. Guests gasped. The wedding cake, once towering and perfect, lay in ruins across the floor. One quick motion, Sabrina tilted her glass and poured the red wine down the front of Lena's wedding dress. Gasps erupted around the hall. The deep red liquid spread across the white lace, staining it like blood. Lena stood frozen, her hands trembling. The guests stared in shock. Lena's heart pounded as she tried to understand what was happening. She demanded that Ethan make her leave, but he didn't move. He looked at Sabrina, not at his wife, and said softly, "She's upset. Just let her calm down." Whispers spread through the room. The bride stood there, humiliated, as her husband defended the woman who had just ruined their wedding cake. Eventually, Ethan and Mallory managed to drag Sabrina outside. Her screams echoed down the hallway until the doors closed behind her. When Ethan returned, his expression wasn't angry at Sabrina. It was cold, directed at Lena. He didn't dance again that night. He barely looked at her. The next morning, Ethan finally spoke. But instead of an apology, his words cut deeper than the night before. "You embarrassed her," he said. "She was drunk, Lena. You overreacted." Lena couldn't believe it. She was the one covered in wine. She was the one who'd been attacked. And yet, somehow she was the one at fault. They argued until Ethan slammed the door and slept on the couch. Days passed. Mallory stopped answering Lena's calls. Ethan refused to talk about Sabrina, or what happened that night. And when Lena brought it up, he'd just say, "Drop it. You're being dramatic." But Lena couldn't drop it. Because the way Sabrina said, "You don't deserve him," didn't sound like drunken jealousy. It sounded like she knew something. A week after the wedding, Lena stood at the edge of the long gravel driveway, staring up at the mansion that was now, on paper, her home. The Holloway estate loomed before her like a monument carved from grief. Its windows stared down like unblinking eyes, tall and gray against a bruised evening sky. Her late grandfather had loved this place. He'd built it stone by stone, each room filled with history and whispers of old money. Now it was hers, every acre, every antique, every secret. Ethan wrapped his arms loosely around her shoulders. "It's perfect," he said softly. "A new beginning for us." His tone was warm, but his embrace wasn't. His touch felt measured, as if he was performing affection rather than feeling it. Lena forced a smile. "Yeah, a new beginning." The words tasted like a lie. Inside, the house smelled faintly of dust and lavender. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting red and gold fragments across the marble floors. Her heels echoed with each step, a lonely, hollow sound that followed her from room to room. The staff had been dismissed years ago after her grandfather's passing. Only one caretaker remained, an older woman named Mrs. Callahan, who appeared rarely, like a ghost moving through the halls. Ethan seemed fascinated by the place. He wandered through every corridor, touching the portraits, opening locked drawers, asking questions about the estate's value. "Your grandfather left you more than you think," he murmured once, eyes glinting. There's history in these walls, and money. The way he said it, money, made Lena's stomach tighten. Days passed. The house creaked at night, its silence unnerving. Ethan was gone most evenings, claiming business calls, or meetings with the bank. He'd return late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his. Lena tried to trust him, to ignore the unease blooming in her chest. But the more she tried to feel close to him, the farther away he seemed. At breakfast he barely looked up from his phone. At dinner he ate in silence. And at night he slept facing the other direction. When she asked if something was wrong, he only smiled that cold, perfect smile. Don't worry, Lena. I'm just handling the estate's paperwork. You wouldn't understand all the legal stuff. But she understood enough to know he was lying. 3 weeks after moving in, a lawyer arrived. He was a small, polite man with tired eyes and a leather briefcase. He carried the final inheritance documents from Lena's grandfather's estate, paperwork that officially transferred ownership to her. Lena sat at the old oak desk in her grandfather's study, her hands trembling slightly as she signed her name across the pages. The pen scratched against the parchment, echoing in the quiet room. When she looked up, Ethan was already watching her. You should add me as co-owner, he suggested casually. In case something ever happens to you. She hesitated. Why would something happen to me? He laughed, too quickly, too easily. You worry too much. I just want to make sure I can take care of everything. For us. It was the "for us" that made her nod. She told herself it was trust. But deep down she knew it was fear of losing him. She signed again. And in that moment, without realizing it, she handed him the keys to everything she had. That night the house was quiet. Too quiet. The wind pressed against the windows like someone breathing just outside. Lena lay awake, staring at the ornate ceiling, tracing the faint cracks that looked almost like veins. Ethan had gone out again. Said he needed to meet a contractor. When the clock struck midnight, she heard the sound, a faint murmur coming from downstairs. She froze. Ethan's voice. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet cold on the floor, and followed the sound down the staircase. The study door was half open, light spilling through the crack. Inside, Ethan stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear. His tone was low, clipped, a side of him she'd never heard before. Once it's done, we leave. She won't suspect a thing. Lena's breath hitched. Her pulse thundered in her ears. There was a pause and then, a soft reply, female, distant but unmistakable. You promise me this time, Ethan? No more lies. Lena's blood ran cold. That voice. She knew it. Sabrina. The woman in the blue dress. The one who poured her wine and smiled while wine dripped down her wedding gown. Ethan chuckled, a sound she didn't recognize. I promise. Just a few more days. Then the money's ours. Lena's hand clutched the wall for balance, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might give her away. Her mind raced. The documents, the inheritance, the sudden urgency to move into the estate. It all made sense now. He hadn't married her for love. He married her for power. For her grandfather's fortune. And once he had it, she would no longer be useful. Lena backed away from the door, her breath shaking, her world collapsing around her. Upstairs, the wind howled through the cracks of the old mansion, the sound almost human. And for the first time, she realized the Holloway estate wasn't her home. It was her cage. Lena overheard those words. Something inside her shattered, quietly like glass under silk. She didn't cry. Didn't storm into the hallway or demand answers. She just stood there, frozen behind the half-closed study door, watching Ethan's reflection shimmer in the glass cabinet. Once it's done, we leave. She won't suspect a thing, he said. Then that voice, soft, honeyed, familiar. Sabrina. You promise me this time, Ethan? No more lies. Lena's heart stopped. Every sound, the ticking clock, the wind against the window panes, seemed to vanish. He didn't marry her for love. He married her for power. For the Holloway estate. For the fortune her grandfather spent decades building from oil, land, and blood. And she'd handed it all to him on paper just hours ago. The next morning, Lena pretended nothing was wrong. Her eyes were swollen, but she smiled through breakfast. Ethan didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. He kissed her cheek and said he was heading into town for legal errands. Lena nodded, her voice steady, her stomach burning. When the door closed behind him, she finally breathed again. She walked to the study, the one room her grandfather had warned her never to enter without purpose. It still smelled faintly of his tobacco and pine oil. On the wall hung his portrait, eyes so lifelike it almost felt like they followed her. And beneath the floorboards she found it. An old ledger. Her grandfather's handwriting. Names, dates, and a symbol she didn't recognize, etched beside each entry. But one thing stood out. The Holloway will, addendum, unexecuted. The pages were half-burned, but she could read enough to see it wasn't finished. He'd been planning something. A contingency. Something about betrayal within bloodlines. And suddenly she realized, her grandfather had never trusted anyone. Not even family. That night Ethan returned late. Too late. The smell of someone else's perfume lingered on his jacket. Lena waited in the dim glow of a single candle. "Did you finish your errands?" she asked softly. He froze. Just for a heartbeat. Then smiled. "You're still up?" She nodded, hiding her trembling hands. "Just reading grandfather's papers. You never told me you met him before he passed." Ethan's eyes flicked toward her. "What are you talking about?" "Your name's in his ledger," she said slowly. "From 2 years ago." He tried to laugh it off, but she saw it, the flicker of panic behind his eyes. 4 days, Lena played the perfect wife. She cooked, smiled, even laughed at his empty jokes. But at night when he slept, she searched. Letters, receipts, hidden bank accounts. Everything traced back to Sabrina Clark. Not just a mistress. A co-conspirator. And, most chillingly, the executor of an offshore trust under Ethan's name. A trust that would activate only upon the legal or natural death of Lena Holloway. Then the whispers began. Late at night, Lena would hear footsteps in the West Wing. Soft, deliberate. But when she checked, no one was there. The portraits along the corridor seemed to tilt slightly each morning, as if they'd turned to watch her sleep. Ethan started locking his phone. Sabrina stopped calling. But the silence between them grew thicker, like the air before a storm. Lena wasn't scared anymore. She was waiting. 3 weeks later, she set her plan in motion. She invited Ethan to dinner in the Grand Hall, the first formal meal since the wedding. The table was dressed in white lace, the same pattern from their wedding day. What? Candles. The faint sound of rain. "Do you love me?" she asked suddenly, her tone fragile. Ethan froze mid-bite. "Of course I do." She smiled faintly. "Then why did you transfer my inheritance into your trust?" He stared at her. Cold. Unblinking. "I did what's best for us," he finally said. Lena stood. "Us? Or you and Sabrina?" The knife clattered from his hand. "You don't understand, Lena," he said, voice rising. "You were never supposed to." Thunder cracked outside, silencing him. "Never supposed to what?" she whispered. He took a step toward her, eyes dark. "Find out." The lights flickered. Then, darkness. Ethan grabbed a candle, but when the flame returned, the portrait above the fireplace had fallen. The frame split cleanly down the center, through Ethan's face. And on the floor beneath it, the old ledger lay open, pages fluttering from the wind. Lena stared. Because this time the ink wasn't faded. The handwriting looked fresh. And beside her name was a new symbol, one that hadn't been there before. It was a cross. And beneath it, a single date. Tomorrow. Lena's breath caught. Ethan's expression shifted from anger to confusion. He followed her gaze. "What the hell is that?" But before she could answer, the candle went out again. The mansion groaned, low, like something breathing within its walls. And in the echoing dark, a faint whisper, her grandfather's voice unmistakable. "You chose poorly, child. Now they will both pay." The storm never stopped that night. Thunder rolled like distant cannon fire, echoing through the old Holloway halls. Lena didn't sleep. She sat in the study, staring at the ledger, her name crossed, tomorrow's date burning into her mind like a countdown. Downstairs, she heard Ethan pacing. Glass clinking. The low murmur of a phone call. She didn't have to guess who it was. Sabrina. Her voice, hushed, trembling. "Are you sure she doesn't know?" Ethan's tone was sharp. "I'll take care of it. Just stay ready. Once the transfer clears, I'll come for you." Lena's fingers curled around the edge of her chair. Every heartbeat felt like a drum inside her skull. He was going to kill her. Maybe not tonight, but soon enough. She waited until his footsteps faded upstairs. Then she moved. Every creak of the floorboards sounded deafening, but she knew this mansion. Every hidden door, every forgotten passage her grandfather once showed her as a child. In the basement she found the fuse box. The lights flickered when she touched it, and for a moment she swore she heard breathing behind her. But when she turned, no one. Just shadows. She flipped the final switch, and the house changed. A hum crawled through the walls. Old mechanisms long dead began to stir, gears shifting in the foundations. It was as if the house had been waiting for her to wake it. At 2:13 a.m. Ethan came downstairs. "Lena?" His voice echoed through the dark. "Why are the lights off?" No reply. He moved deeper into the hall, lightning slicing through the windows, for a moment revealing her silhouette at the far end. "Lena?" She didn't move. The next flash of light, she was gone. He turned, heart racing. "Stop this. You're scaring me." A voice drifted from the walls, soft, layered, almost mechanical. "Am I?" It wasn't just her voice. It was her grandfather's too. In the study, the portrait had fallen again. But this time Ethan saw what was underneath. A metal door, one that hadn't been opened in decades. He pulled it open, revealing a hidden chamber lit by a single bulb. Inside, papers, photographs, and an old tape recorder. He pressed play. A man's voice filled the room. Her grandfather. "To whoever finds this, if you are not of Holloway blood, leave. This house is not yours to take." Static. "But if betrayal enters these walls, the estate will defend its heir. And judgment will come by dawn." The tape clicked off. Then the door slammed shut behind him. Lena watched from the top of the staircase, her face pale, her eyes glinting through tears. She hadn't meant for it to go this far. She only wanted to scare him, to make him confess. But the mansion had other plans. The chandeliers began to sway. Windows sealed with a shriek of iron. Ethan pounded on the locked door below. "Lena, what did you do?" She took one step down, her voice breaking. "You did this to yourself." The storm outside grew violent. Lightning struck the estate's tower, power surging through the walls. Every portrait ignited at once, faces burning silently in the flames. Ethan's screams echoed from below, then stopped. The door creaked open moments later, smoke spilling out, but no body. Only the smell of ash. Lena collapsed, sobbing. The house was silent again. 3 days later, the police arrived. They found no trace of Ethan. Just a burnt ledger, still warm to the touch. Her grandfather's handwriting somehow etched deeper, as if rewritten by fire. And under the new entries, one fresh signature. Sabrina Clark. The same night, Sabrina was found dead in her apartment, the cause unknown. No wounds. No struggle. Just a single blackened symbol carved into her mirror, the Holloway crest. Months passed. Lena never left the mansion again. People in town whispered that she'd gone mad, that she talked to the house at night. But those who dared to visit swore they heard a man's voice answer her. Sometimes laughter. Sometimes pleading. And every time lightning struck the tower, the west wing lights flickered, as if someone else was still living there. They said love built the Holloway estate, but power made it bleed. And in the end, the walls didn't just remember. They avenged. In the end, Lena never escaped the Holloway mansion. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe some houses don't just hold memories, they hold justice. The town still whispers about the lights that flicker in the west wing, about the woman who talks to shadows, and the man who answers from beyond the walls. Because some vows aren't broken by death. Was it revenge? A curse? Or did the Holloway estate simply remember what was promised? Do you think you've heard strange stories before? You haven't heard this kind of haunting love yet? Like, share and subscribe, because the next story will make you question how well you really know the person sleeping beside you.